I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 218th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today, our panel will discuss modern American morality. How has it changed over the years, and is it better or worse? Today's panel begins with Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services. Then Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist, and Patty Haskins, former member of the Wadsworth City Council and retired member of the Wadsworth High School faculty. Bryan, American moral behavior has undergone considerable change since World War II. Some say that in some ways it's better, in some ways worse. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think if you are a consumer of social media, you would have to say that it's gotten worse. It's really hard to get a handle on this because it's fairly subjective. For some people, you know, they feel like this is the good old days, that there's no issues whatsoever. But if I were to, let's say, resurrect my grandfather and put him in today's environment, he would definitely say this is not anything that he was ever prepared for. And I'm not sure how you judge it. There are plenty of polls. Pew has done a poll about people that attend church, if you want to judge it, morality from that perspective. And those numbers are actually down. I don't know exactly the number, but I know it is down over a period of time, 5, 6,
particularly in the mainline churches, John.
Yes, particularly in the mainline churches.
Yes.
I can tell you, for instance, our Rotary Club, I wouldn't say, we're a very moral group of people. We believe in giving back to the community. We believe in service above self. We have a very hard time attracting members because people don't see that as very important. I believe it is. I believe giving back to the community through a service organization or through a charity is just as important as living and paying taxes in a community. So I would have to say that we have slipped when it comes to our morals. I don't believe that the vitriol that you read and see on social media is an accurate representation of what people really feel. It's very easy to spew something and to become a keyboard warrior. But when you engage that person on the street, or you call them or you talk to them, they have a totally different view. I mean, they're almost reasonable, It's like, oh yeah, I agree exactly with what you're saying. It's like, well, wait a second, how can that be? So, yeah, I would think.
Brenda has often thought that people get on social media and say things they would never say to somebody's face, and you're sort of reinforcing.
Yeah. And Mike Tyson has said this before. He said, social media has created a class of people that if they ever said anything like that to your face in public, they'd get punched in the face. I don't agree with Mike Tyson. I don't want anybody to come at me that, I'm advocating, going out and punching someone in the face. I'm not advocating that at all. I'm just saying that he made his
living punching people in the face.
Well, yes, Mike Tyson is very good at punching people in the face, and he's made that observation. And I wouldn't say that he's, I mean, he obviously has his opinions, but I think it has helped or accelerated the slide in morality. So I'd be interested in knowing, how do you judge that? I mean, is it, I know what the definition of morality for me is, but I'm interested in what the definition of what others think morality is.
Mm-hmm.
So
We're going to hear from Ron on that.
Okay.
John, you had mentioned something about, is this the good old days? You know, you and I'm a year or two older than you, but we were both young people in the 1950s. And for some folks, you might think it was the good old days. It was relative economic stability and growth. I grew up in a small Pennsylvania town. It was 99 and 90% white, lower middle class in general, but people had jobs and good things going on. Looking back in retrospect, you realize there was a lot of systemic racism. There was gender inequalities and all that sort of thing. But it was a pretty nice time, really, for a young person growing up, in spite of the threat of nuclear annihilation going on all the time. But then the 60s happened, and civil rights issues exploded, and the anti-war movement exploded, and continuing to the present day. Things of the controversy all the time. First, there's interracial marriage it required a court order to take care of, and LGBTQ episodes and things like Black Lives Matter. Now, my contention is that these upsets in the society happened because they needed to happen. I think that today, even though there is division and things that morality is here because people are looking for justice. You know, someone has said that the opposite of war is not peace. The opposite of war is justice. And I think injustice and incivility are major issues in our society. And I think that people are, since the 50s at least, are very, very aware of this and are trying to work very hard to control it. Morality is a tough definition. You know, people equate it with you know, sexual mores and habits. And so, well, personally, don't think God cares what we do with our genitals, as long as we're respectful of other people and don't try to exploit them. You know, it's just my own particular opinion on that. But certainly, I think morality slips, divisiveness occurs. I think divisiveness probably occurs because truth is out there, and people who have their beliefs and their long-held beliefs challenged or become apprehensive about that and become defensive about that. As human beings, we want to sort of retreat into our cave and sit by the fire because going out in the darkness, there's lions and tigers and bears out there. But lions and tigers and bears are our better selves, and we need to pay attention to them and to look for justice in our society and to work toward it. We need to be woke about that. And that's a bad word these days, perhaps among people. We need to be woke. We need to look at where injustices are and do what we can to fight them. I think that's my definition of morality in a way, is to be aware of injustice and to try to work to prevent that injustice and to try to do what we can to make the world a better place.
Whether those injustices are real or imaginary.
Sometimes, yeah.
Excuse me, I just wanted to say that as a parting shot at you and go to Patty without you responding. You understand? Patty, what are your thoughts?
Well, when I think of morality, basically, I think of the difference between right and wrong. And, you know, I try to look, you know, think of myself and where I learned that differentiation between right and wrong. And it was really in two places. You know, first of all, through my church participation. As was already mentioned, you know, so many people now are not attending church. And while I do not feel you need to attend a church in order to be a good person, for me, it really helps because that church provides me my moral compass to tell me what is right and what is wrong. I mean, even if you look at the foundations of this country, in our laws, what have we determined to be wrong? Well, it's based upon the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal. All of these things come from basic Christian, Judeo-Christian mores that we have within this country. And that church affiliation, for me, provides that moral compass. The other way I got that moral compass, though, is from my parents. to me, the family, and I know Bryan has commented on this many times, you know, the American family is so important. I knew what was right and wrong because my parents taught me what was right and what was wrong. And unfortunately, I'm not sure that that's happening in today's society. In too many cases, we have single parent families. Now, I'm a divorced woman. I raised my 2 kids by myself. So I'm not saying that that's wrong, but it is so much more difficult. You know, I would come home from work some nights and I would be exhausted. And all I wanted to do was, and I had a headache, or my nose was running, or I had an upset stomach. And all I wanted to do was just go to bed and sleep it off. But I had kids at home and I had to take care of them because I was the only one there. I didn't have that spouse that was there to assist me with raising the kids. You know, I'd like to think I did the best job I could, but it's so much easier when we have 2 parents, when you have a male role model, when you have the female role model, when all of that is contained within the family, it makes it so much easier. Just the idea of marriage has really gone down the tubes. I think I looked up and it was something like over 40% of the children born today are not born into married households. And there are something like, I think it was like close to 50% of the family, 53%, I think, of the families only have one parent. You know, if we want to make it easier for children to learn right from wrong, because that's where it starts, it ideally has to be done within the family. Now, you know, it would be wonderful if we could go back to the days where, you know, one parent worked and the other one stayed at home with the kids. Unfortunately, in our present economy, that's next to impossible to do. And almost all families, when there are 2 parents, have both working. So we maybe can't go back to that, but stress that for us. Another concern, though, that I have with morality is what we see on TV, in the movies, in video games. And I'm not saying that video games cause violence or that movies cause disreputable behavior. But what is, excuse me, what our children are exposed to oftentimes is not, I think, good for them. We have desensitized them to violence so that they think that something is right when it really isn't. One of my pet peeves is the way that people dress on TV. I mean, I look at singers and actresses and just want to say, put some clothes on, please. I don't want to see this.
Then you can't go to the junior prom.
You know, I'd like to say that I have the utmost respect for Patty and Ron. I agree 110% with both of them. Patty has done a wonderful job of raising her children. And we need more men and women like Patty and Ron that take the responsibility to teach their children the ways of society, the right ways of society. It's harder, like Patty pointed out, for a single parent to parent. The ideal situation, and there are any number of studies, very longitudinal studies over many years that point to the importance of a mother and a father, a 2-parent family. The Black community, and there have been many people, Dr. Ben Carson, Larry Elder, Denzel Washington, are coming out and saying, we need to have our community, our Black community, embrace 2 parents, a mother and a father. And they speak extensively on this. And whether you're right or left or liberal or conservative, we all have to agree that the family needs bolstered. And we need to do things that encourage people. If that means, we put in place ways for a parent to stay home and to raise those kids. I don't believe that a preschool, and I don't want to say I'm not bashing preschools. I know it's important, but I don't believe when you drop your 2-year-old off at a preschool that they're going to get the same care and attention that a mother would. It's just not possible. I know they're important. I know that single parents take advantage of that. I'm all for them, but I don't believe that we can expect much more out of that particular failsafe of a preschool or all day nursery and all that kind of stuff. It's really the parents' responsibility to teach their children the rights and wrongs, and we're not doing that at this point in time. It's just unfortunate.
Would you say that the woman should stay at home with her children rather than go to work?
I think that between the two of them, that decision can be made. Whether it's the mom or the dad. I know some very successful stay-at-home dads.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to go to the office because when I came home, the last thing that I would ever say to my wife was, "So what did you do today?" Those were fighting words in my house. I mean, I walked in and I said, "Man, you're doing a great job. Listen, hon, I mean, it looks like you had a tough day. Let's figure out dinner or whatever. I mean, you got to tread lightly." And whether that's the husband or the wife coming home, it is a real effort to raise a family. Absolutely. It really is. It is hard work. It's day in and day out. It is a burden, but that's the way you grow, and that's the way you develop that chamber in your heart of love and concern for people. And I don't think it's really happening that much as it should.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have a young friend who she had a medical condition for years where she could not have children, and she never married. There came a cure for that, and she decided to have 2 children. She had them both by donor, using the same donor so that the kids would actually be brother and sister, turns out, to the boy and a girl. However, she continued to work. However, she lived next door to her mother. She herself came from a single parent family. She didn't really reconnect with her birth father until later as an adult when that happened. But that's an exception to that, I think. But
sure,
not really, because there was family. There was family there.
And once again, let's go back. The nuclear family, it was not uncommon for grandma and grandpa to live.
Oh, yeah.
With your family. I mean, my great grandfather lived with my grandfather. That was little grandpa. He had a room upstairs, smoked cigars, and was always cranky, And I was like, "Bryan, stay away from little grandpa. He's not happy today, And he'd walk around the house spitting and chewing about something. But he was there and he was being taken care of. We're not getting that anymore. We have kids that don't even, they're not around an older generation and to pass on.
One of the reasons for that too, though, is that we are such a more mobile society. It used to be, you grew up in Wadsworth and you stayed in Wadsworth and all your family was there. Now people are stretched out all across the country.
Yeah, true. So
they don't have that nucleus that's readily available for them to provide that family unit.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, back to some of what I was saying earlier. That I think there are changes. There have been things that are happening that are good. When I moved to Wadsworth in 1964, had I been black, I would not have been able to buy a house north of Broad Street. Right. And that's changed. Fortunately, that's changed. Yeah. It's changed all over the country, pretty much. Yeah, at least officially. So I think there's lots of instances where we can see changes for the good, and I think they're continuing to happen. So I have hopes for our future.
Me too.
I know there are problems, but I have hopes for it.
Me too. Yeah.
One of the things I keep hearing is about what is the latest generation called? Gen.
I've lost track.
I know there's Gen Z and Gen X and Millennial. But I've one of the things that I've heard is that many of the very young generation are more self-centered than having that open view to help other people. And that's part of, to me, morality, that you shouldn't look at me first. You know, Bryan, you mentioned like the service clubs. You know, I belong to a couple as well.
Yeah.
And that's so important to provide help to those that are in need.
Yeah. No, I'm right there with you. Yeah.
A number of years ago, Tom Brokaw wrote a book called The Greatest Generation. And he was talking about the World War II and the soldiers. And every time I hear that generation referred to as the greatest generation, I cringe. They were the generation of Jim Crow. In fact, recently, the President Biden pinned the Congressional Medal of Honor on a black officer who was put in for the Congressional Medal of Honor 40 or 50 years ago. In fact, he'd been put in several times, and somehow the paper kept getting lost.
Yeah.
A lot of reluctance on the part of the greatest generation to give awards to black soldiers. In fact, during that whole period of time, blacks were so limited in the military. In fact, when I was in the late 50s, most of the blacks worked in the kitchen. They were not, active in the kind of MOS, military occupational status. Oh, I forget what the S stands for. But they weren't given responsibilities that the white people were given. I think that we've made a tremendous amount of progress. The mid-'60s had some really good and bad things going. The Civil Rights Act of '64, to me, was one of the greatest things that ever happened. Followed by the war on poverty, which is one of the worst things that ever happened. But our morality has improved so much because of the Civil Rights Act of '64 and the destruction of legalized racism. I think that's one of the real positive things that's happened, in spite of the fact that there are a lot of race profiteers out there claiming all kinds of current injustices that are only imaginary and based on the profitability of injustice. So
John, when do we stop beating ourselves over the head with this? I mean, I understand completely there was racism and Jim Crow, and I don't want to make any excuses for that. But to be sitting here today in 2023 and trying to go back, it's like tearing down a statue of a Civil War person, when not even really understanding completely. Nobody wants to take the time to really understand those particular events. I know it was wrong, and hopefully we've progressed to the point that it doesn't happen again. But I just don't feel like we need to continue to go back and just pick at that scab. There's no country out there. Do we continue to kick the Egyptians around for enslaving the Jews for how many thousands of years? Nobody talks about that, So what about the other? Look at the Bible and look at all the slavery that went on there. Do we continue to
actually? What's
that?
And still is.
Yeah, there is still this happening, but I just sometimes I recoil when we want to go back and somehow diminish the efforts of those people.
I think we have to figure out a way to take the profit out of victimization.
I would agree, 100%.
I think we need to. The only reason you need to look back is to just simply learn from your mistakes so you don't fall into that trap again.
Exactly.
I agree with you, but we need to look forward because racism does still exist.
Oh, no doubt. I'm right there with you.
We still have ways to go.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
do it by looking forward
Mhm.
What
to
is
that
the worst
ultimate
kind,
goal as opposed to looking backward.
Right.
what's the worst kind of racism? Black racism or white racism? Which one is holding
Well,
people?
any type of racism is
Any
wrong,
type.
but I don't think that.
Yeah.
I don't think that white racism has had the dire consequences that black racism has had. I think that's a really unfair comparison
Mhm.
between the two.
Also, in my opinion, even the profiteering that has always taken place and will continue to take place will sort itself out eventually. It doesn't mean that you need to stop the movement because people are taking profitable advantage from it. I think if the movement has a search for justice, it should go on, and people should be aware that there is profiteering and try to combat that as much as possible.
Yeah.
It's going to be there,
Yeah.
but it doesn't negate the need for the movement that may be going on. Like Black Lives
Okay.
Matter is a very good example.
Back to our original question then, would you say that our continued awareness of discrimination against blacks and gays and Asians and the fact that we know that it's there and that we care about it and we're fighting it, isn't that a plus on the morality side?
That's a plus on the morality side.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
I'm trying.
Yeah.
Perhaps
I think
did
we're
not
making
make that clear,
improvement.
but that's true.
I mean, yeah, we're slowly evolving into better people. I think that's the looking forward to the future. I hope I'm better today than I was yesterday.
Okay, and every generation is going to say, "Oh, what's wrong with kids these days?"
Oh, yeah,
That'd be-
I heard that. I remember from my parents, and
yes.
we all did.
Back in the 60s, there was a pop psychology book called I've forgotten exactly what he called All Games People Play. And one of those games is Ain't It Awful? So
Yeah.
people play Ain't It Awful? Ain't it too bad today? And assume how much better it was then. But it ain't so.
Well, we just
Well,
run
if
out
you
of
want to
time.
draw a comparison, watch the movie about Elvis Presley and see how shocked they were that,
Yeah.
what Elvis Presley was doing, and compare that today, what happened at the Super Bowl. I mean,
I know we're out of time, but I want to make this one comment about that. Back in the 50s, people were complaining about all the things that rock and roll was going to lead to.
Yeah.
yeah,
Hasn't it come true?
I'll tell you.
That's the question. Well, thank you very much, folks.
You bet. It's good to see everybody.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.